Welcome everyone to Touch of Torah this January 9th, Tuesday evening. And we are very pleased to have Rabbi Barry Silver with us tonight. We're going to be talking about the Exodus chapter of Vayera. And take it away, Rabbi Barry.
Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody. We're reading from the second Sedra in the second book of the Bible, Exodus, in Hebrew Shemot. This describes the first seven plagues of in Egypt, and it also comes on the heels of God indicating a new name when Moses asks, "What should he tell the people if they ask what God's name is?" He says, I am what I am, or also you could interpret it, I will be what I will be. So rather than me pontificate on the Torah, I thought it might be interesting for me to ask questions of everyone and we can generate a discussion. The Torah says that God hardened Pharaoh's heart. My question to everybody is, why would he do that? Why would he intentionally harden the heart of Pharaoh so that Pharaoh would become even more entrenched and stubborn rather than just freeing the people right away? Is there anyone with us tonight who would like to share an opinion or a thought about why in the Torah God would harden Pharaoh's heart? Anybody want to share an opinion on that?
Maybe to make him look like a bit even worse guy than he already was.
Hey, well, if you want to tell a good story, you might as well make evil really, really bad. Go ahead, Alan. Oh, you're on mute. You got to unmute yourself. There you
I
go.
think it's pretty apparent that the reason was so that God could show off his powers.
Huh.
You know, the Pharaoh would say no, and God would push him, and then the Pharaoh would say no again, and God would push him again and show him how powerful he is.
That's probably true. Our ancestors wanted to show off God's powers, so they created a God who was a bit of a show-off, a little egotistical, and decided to harden Pharaoh's heart so he could perform a bunch of plagues and show how powerful he was. Yes. Anybody else? Okay. Well, let me just share with you that a lot of times people are very mean, and we have trouble imagining why would somebody be that mean? They couldn't really be that bad. It's almost as if they're being controlled. And so the passage might be trying to indicate to us that a lot of times we act in ways that are very harmful and hateful, as if we're being controlled. We shouldn't allow our passions to control us. We should control them and not act in such a way that is completely bizarre and hateful and irrational. All right. Next question. God reveals himself with a brand new name to Moses. Why would he do that? Why not just tell everything to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? Why, if God had a special covenant with them, would he withhold information from them, including something important as his name, and not reveal that until generations later with Moses? Anyone want to take a stab at that?
Maybe he didn't think the people were ready to hear his name or to know. Once he was named, he might be more real, so to speak. And he didn't think the people might be ready for that yet.
That's very good, yes. In ancient times, if you knew someone's name, you had power. Remember, like with Rumpelstiltskin? If you knew the name, then you had some kind of control. So he might have thought the people weren't ready for that power yet. Maybe they weren't ready for an entire revelation yet. Maybe they needed to be spoon-fed information about God. Yes, very good. Ron?
Yeah, in chapter 6, verse 2, it says, and God spoke unto Moses and said unto him, I am the Lord, and I appeared unto Abraham and unto Isaac and unto Jacob as God Almighty, but my name was I think it's made me not known to them. And I have also established my covenant with them to give them the land of Canaan, the land of their sojourns wherein they adjourned. And moreover, I have heard the groaning of the children of Israel, whom the Egyptians kept in bondage. And I have remembered my covenant. Wherefore say unto the children of Israel, I am the Lord, and I will bring you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians, and I will deliver you from bondage, and I will create freedom with an outstretched arm and with great judgments. And he just keeps going on. Actually, this all sounds like it's from the Haggadah.
No, the Haggadah is from this.
Or the Haggadah is from this, yes. It's like the same language from the Haggadah. It sounds to me like.
Yeah, the Haggadah is quoting from this chapter of Exodus.
Yeah, so where it says, where I read, where it says, but by my name, yeah, is that the way it is? Because it's a little scribbled up here in my book.
Yeah, well, let me help you a little bit. One of the problems when we translate from one language to the other is that the translation doesn't do justice to the original. So this translation certainly fits that category, especially speaking something as important as the name of God. In English, the translation, I am the Lord. The Hebrew doesn't say anything like that. That's not what the Hebrew says at all. The Orthodox refrain from using God's name. It's too holy. So they use a euphemism.
Hashem.
Well, even more than that. But in the euphemisms, the original language is lost. So we have no clue unless we know Hebrew and we can read Hebrew. So in the original, the name of God is Yahweh. Yud He Vav He.
Yeah, this is
interesting thing about Yahweh is that it's all vowels. In English, it sounds like a vav, sounds like a consonant. But in Hebrew, the V is pronounced kind of like a W. Yud, He, W, He. These are Yah. It's all vowels. Yeah. What does that tell us? Well, the name of God is soft, like a breeze, like the wind. It's not hard. It's a still quiet voice, Yahweh. And what does Yahweh mean? Well, the Lord is not what it says at all. It doesn't say the Lord. The Lord is Adon, Adonai. This doesn't say Adon, Adonai.
There's 76 words that are used for God.
These are mostly descriptions. There's only one name, one real name that God has. That's Yahweh. So you could talk about the president and you could use his actual name. The president has a given name. Or you could say the president or POTUS or the commander-in-chief. You can use 72 descriptions, but the name is really just one name. Although in this chapter, you see that the name kind of is a little fuzzy. The actual name is Yahweh. As I say, it's also referred to as the tetragrammaton, which is a fancy way of saying 4 letters. And these letters are vowels like the wind.
Right.
Also in this chapter, there's kind of a description of Yahweh. And Yahweh really is the imperative form of to be. You could translate it as that which causes existence or brings about existence, or the creative process that causes things to exist. That's what God's name is. It's nothing more than that, that which generates existence. We don't speak Hebrew or have a rabbi that's going to translate literally what these words mean. We're stuck with nonsense. I am the Lord. The Lord, as we know, is a medieval title that's given to people who ruled over vassals. It's a human term, a lord or a vassal. It's used to describe people in Israel today. If you want to say Mr. Smith, you say Adon Smith. The name of God is far beyond anything remotely like that. And it's rather mysterious in that it's the one that generates existence. Now, there's a longer form of it in which God says, Ehyeh asher ehyeh. I will be what I will be. And Ehyeh is similar, related to Yahweh. It's related to being or existence. I will be what I will be could be thought of in this way. What God is not yet reached fruition. What God is an evolving creative power that's constantly blossoming in the universe. About 13.7 billion years ago, this creative power was just a singularity and expanded and contracted into galaxies and stars and planets and us. It's kind of like a fetus. Fetus was just one zygote, one cell. That's how we started. And it became 2 and 4 and 8 and 16 and 32 and 64 and 128 and 256 cells. And it became us. I will be what I will be means that God is not something that was foreordained. Creative process is constantly unfolding. We're part of it. Each of us is a manifestation of that creative power. And this passage is quite profound. Maybe Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob had enough to deal with just figuring out God as a unifying force in the universe. That was enough for them to chew on for a while. And rather than give it all at once. Another way of reflecting this is that each generation becomes more and more sophisticated, knowledgeable. And so their understanding of this creative power expands. It's not something that's fixed, something that's always creating and growing and evolving. All these things could be a response to why God would give one name to one generation and another name to the next. Anyone want to share anything about these thoughts before we move on?
Yeah, it sounds to me, Rabbi, that they don't know what God is, and they don't know who God is really, and what they're talking about is a concept rather than something that's concrete. And this is basically how we come about eventually in the year 2022, or however long you're at it, in creating Cosmic Judaism. We're calling it like it is, and it's not at all the way the way it is. The people who wrote the Bible are the ones who thought up these concepts. And the names, all the different names that have been given to God, I think there's 76 that they said, or a big number like that.
I think it's 72 according to Kabbalah.
Kabbalah, yeah. So yeah, that's what I'm alluding to. I just wasn't sure the number. But basically, the different names that have been given to him are all conceptual names. They are, they really are not meaningful, other than if you want to take the English word for God and say, this is the force in the universe that's almighty. It's the force that created heaven and earth. It's the force that created um, the whole cosmos. Um, but how much did they know about the science that we know today? And we still
I couldn't agree
don't.
with you more. God in the Torah is a concept, and our concept expands as our knowledge expands and as history unfolds. For instance, if you were to say, what is America? You would say in the early days, it's a colony. And then you would say it's a nation that broke off from England. Then you could say it's a slave nation, a nation in which many, many people are enslaved. Then you could say it's a genocidal nation. You could say it's a nation where some people are free and some aren't, before women's rights and the right to vote. If you were to ask today, what is America? The answer would be different than it was 100 or 200 years ago. We're unfolding. And so, Ron, I agree with you. If you ask, what is God? God is what this universe, what this cosmos is evolving into. It's not fixed. And our concept changes as our knowledge changes. Sometimes our concept is rather primitive and barbaric. God is not limited to what we think. There really is an objective reality out there about this creative power. We're just learning to tap into it and to understand it. If you were to ask, what is the sun? Our ancestors would have said it's a circular object that's driven across the sky in a chariot. How big is it? They'd say, I don't know, maybe it's the size of a beach ball. Today, we know the sun's a little bit bigger than that. It's not being driven across the sky. We're driven around it. Our understanding is vastly superior. Our understanding of the universe and of God and this creative power is vastly superior. So if you ask, what is God? We're still learning. We'll never know completely. It's constantly unfolding because God is not a particular entity. God's not like us with the bodily boundaries and entity. It's a creative effluence of creativity and creative power. And that's what makes it so unique and what they call ineffable. It's something that we can't say, there it is, here's the boundaries of it. That's what we learn
That's
from this
exactly right.
passage.
Yeah.
Now, I would like to also share, what role did women play in the Exodus story and in the Moses saga? Because you don't hear much about women. What role did they play?
Well,
Miriam,
anybody?
Miriam, Moses' sister, played a role, dancing and frolicking on the other side of the Red Sea when they did leave Egypt, and singing songs and with timbrels and all kinds of instruments.
what was Moses's mother's name? Yeheva, was it, or
Yeah, Yochebed.
Yeheva? Yeah. So she played a big role in
Well,
that,
that's true.
huh?
That's
When
true for sure.
Yeah, when she, when Miriam found the basket with the baby in it, she brought it to her mother, and her mother was but a maidservant to the Pharaoh, and she didn't let on that this was her child, but she ended up breastfeeding the child, Moses, and she
We don't say breastfeeding, it's too risque. We say nursing. Sounds
nursing.
better.
Yeah.
Well, yes, that's correct. Let me just pick up on what Sharon was saying. Because a lot of people think, okay, she sang songs, so what? She added music. Who cares? Our ancestors didn't sell short music and singing and song. It was part of our religious expression and spirituality. She was someone who brought to life the wonders, the miracles, the deliverance in a magnificent way. And so, yes, she was a major part of the story.
She also became known as the person who, first of all, she has Miriam Yam is the ocean, and for this reason, she's got her name is associated with water. She, whenever they were in the desert and they couldn't find water, she was the one who found a well or a place where they actually found the water. And
yeah. Well, another way to look at it is that Moses was the superhero of his day. Today we have Batman and Superman and Spider-Man and Aquaman, and they have control over certain forces of nature. Moses and his mom, as you point out, seemed to have great control over water. He split the sea and the Jews went across.
right.
He got water to show up out of a rock. He was delivered through water on the Nile. The first plague, he made the water turn red. He was the Aquaman of his day. He had great control over water. And like you say, Miriam, Yam is the seas. And so Miriam, the sister
Yes.
of Moses, aided and abetted in his ability to influence water. Also, the midwives delivered the children from Pharaoh by stalling and procrastinating so that some of these children could live. Today, midwives are making a resurgence, and people are starting to realize that giving birth isn't just a medical thing, it's an emotional thing. And people are starting to recognize the importance of having women helping other women at this beautiful, blessed time to help deliver children into the world. Well, midwives were important then, and they're making a resurgence now. I only have one more question that I'd like to pose, and that is, what do we learn from the story for today? What's the relevance of this story and any of the aspects that we've talked about today? Anybody want to share a thought about that?
Well, we're seeing how there were basically two kinds of people. There were the Egyptians, and then there were the Jews, who were the foreigners in Egypt. And we learned that the Jews who were there were basically slaves, and they didn't have their own. They weren't able to create anything on their own. They had to do what they were told or what was expected of them.
Right. The godliness in them, their creative power was stifled.
Exactly.
They tried to destroy the inherent dignity and decency in all people. Right. Anything else? Anybody else? Well, I'd like to raise with you, Sharon, I can't say, do you have something you want to say? Okay. I want to raise with you something that's not said. We hear from Pharaoh, he's not letting these people go. We hear from Moses, Shalachat Ami, let my people go. We hear from the Jewish people, hey, Moses, you're causing trouble. Now we got to make our own bricks. Stop talking politics. Mind your own business. Don't challenge political authority. Let's just go with the status quo. It's not that bad. Who don't we hear from? The people of Egypt. They're conspicuous in their silence. They don't speak out for the Jewish people. They don't say to Pharaoh, what you're doing is wrong, it's not just. They don't say, let them go. At first, they're silent. And their silence brought about their destruction. Egypt was destroyed. It went through horrific plagues because the people didn't speak up and allowed the cruelty of Pharaoh to prevail. We do that today also in our society. Our leaders do many terrible things and lead us in the bad direction. Some people speak up, but not enough. And because not enough people speak up and demand change, we have maniacs running around with semi-automatic weapons. We have people who are sick, who can't get access to healthcare because they're not rich. They can't afford it. We have people who are willing to watch carnage in Ukraine and give them just enough so that they can defend themselves, but not enough to drive these horrible people out of the land. We have women who can't control their own reproductive system. And we have a species that is bringing horrible plagues upon our world by allowing our earth to be destroyed by leaders who are clueless and science deniers, and we don't speak up. We're silent at our peril. If we don't do what Jews are supposed to do, to be a thorn in the side of autocrats and dictators and would-be tyrants, if we don't do that, we in America will suffer plagues like we've never seen before. That is one of the untold lessons of this part of the Bible. I want to thank everybody for joining with us.
Rabbi, we already are suffering from some of those plagues.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We're totally suffering horribly from those plagues right now.
Yes.
And this is just a little bit compared to what will happen. Just like in Egypt, they suffered plagues, which was only a foreshadowing of much worse to come. We're being warned. We're being tested. The question is, will we wake up out of our stupor and heed the warning or continue in our silence? Thank you, everybody, for participating.